Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome, everyone. Today we're doing a deep dive, heading straight into the spectral heart of the American West. We're exploring the, well, surprisingly extensive and honestly kind of terrifying paranormal landscape of Oklahoma, the Sooner State.
Yeah, Sooner State might need a rethink
Uh,
based on just the sheer volume of sources we've sifted through,
yeah.
covering everything from like early military forts to these Gilded Age oil scandals.
Mhm.
Maybe Spooky State fits better.
Maybe so. And that's our mission. It's pretty ambitious, actually. We've gathered accounts covering dozens of haunted places. You've got historic forts, opulent hotels, yeah, humble cemeteries, abandoned schools, the whole gamut.
Right.
And we're going to synthesize all that, give you a shortcut, basically, to the most compelling, the most chilling, and importantly, the most historically rooted stories Oklahoma has to offer. We want to get beyond just, spooky campfire tales.
And what's really fascinating looking through these accounts is how structured the hauntings often are. They aren't just random creepy feelings. The spectral activity is almost always tied directly back to some specific historical trauma or a really tragic life event. It often mirrors the state's turbulent formation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You can see the echoes of the land runs, the brutality on the Civil War frontier, and then those awful social pressures that came with the oil boom in the 20th century.
Exactly. And the concentration of these stories is, wow, especially in the older, historically dense cities, places like Guthrie, the original territorial capital, and Tulsa, too.
Yeah, those places where you had this collision of big money and, frankly, big violence. It really suggests that certain intense pockets of history just refuse to fade away. Okay, so to kick things off, let's start right back at the beginning. Oklahoma's rugged frontier days. This history is just steeped in military conflict, rapid, sometimes chaotic settlement, and, yeah, a lot of violence. So we're heading straight to the places defined by the soldier, the fort, where those first conflicts really left their spectral marks.
And that takes us immediately to, I think, one of the most significant and persistently haunted frontier sites in the whole state, Fort Washita. It's down near Durant. This fort has such a long, kind of complicated history. Established way back in 1842 as a key U.S. military post. And its main job initially was protecting the Chickasaw and Choctaw nations who'd just been relocated there, protecting them from, outside incursions, but also internal conflicts.
Right, until the Civil War completely changed its role.
Exactly. It was occupied and pretty badly damaged by Confederate forces between 1861 and 1865. So the ground itself is just layered. Layers of conflict, shifting loyalties, abandonment. It's all there.
And the main ghost story seems to reflect that foundational violence perfectly. You mentioned Aunt Jane.
Ah, yes. The vengeful spirit of Aunt Jane. She was apparently a woman connected to the fort back in the 1840s. The core legend, the one you hear most often, says she was brutally murdered by thieves, probably sometime in the mid-1800s. She apparently refused point blank to give up her money, and, crucially, some versions of the story, the really grim ones, specify she was actually decapitated.
Wow.
Yeah, and that her remains were scattered across the grounds. And that specific detail is often pointed to as the reason her spirit is so angry, so restless.
That detail about her spirit's evolution is what gets me. It's incredibly chilling. Her haunting wasn't just, like, seeing a misty figure. Her spirit is said to have actually possessed a local child. Molly Stalkup, was it? Late 19th, early 20th century?
That's the account. And the spirit, apparently speaking through Molly, threatened to cut off the poor girl's hair. Just kept repeating this threat until Molly's mother intervened with, sustained, desperate prayer. That supposedly forced the entity to back off.
That level of direct, physical, manipulative threat through possession, that feels really different. It's deeply unsettling and definitely stands out from your standard phantom sightings or cold spots.
It absolutely does. That possession narrative feels older, darker somehow. It suggests the entity is carrying this intense, unresolved rage. And Aunt Jane isn't alone there. Those old sandstone walls, the reconstructed Bonahan cabin, they're hotspots. Reenactors, visitors who actually stayed overnight, they report these intense strangulation sensations.
Seriously, like physically feeling choked?
Yes, waking up abruptly, feeling like someone invisible is standing right over them, or having these terrifying recurring dreams about suffocating. Just awful.
Do the sources connect those suffocation dreams specifically to Aunt Jane's violent death, or is it maybe linked to other spirits there?
It seems like a mix, honestly.
Yeah.
It suggests this sort of residual trauma just embedded in the structures themselves. But we also have reports of a specific Confederate soldier's ghost, a guy named Willie Mitchell. So individual tragedies definitely cling to the site too. And then there's the phantom drumming, This persistent, deep, resonant sound that people hear quite often could be Native American spirits, maybe connected to the nations the fort was meant to protect, or just the echo of the constant military drumming from the past. It's this strange oral echo of all the conflict the fort witnessed.
Okay, so if we shift focus a bit northwest, we find historic Fort Reno.
No?
Over in El Reno, now this place seems even more layered. Established later, 1874, it started as a standard military fort, but then it became this huge remount depot.
Right, a remount depot, which is basically a massive center for breeding, training, and supplying horses and mules for the U.S. Army. A really critical logistical function for the whole Western campaign, actually.
Okay, that explains the sheer size of the grounds then.
Absolutely, it was a major hub. But then its history took another sharp turn during World War II when it was repurposed as a German POW camp.
So you've got Native American history, the frontier cavalry, global conflict, all compressed into this one single location.
Exactly. And the haunting seems to reflect that complexity. It's not usually one single ghost people report, but more of a full, kind of high-energy sensory experience for visitors.
Like what specifically?
Well, dramatic, very localized cold spots, the sound of loud footsteps, like someone chasing them down empty halls, doors slamming violently when absolutely no one is nearby. And visually, people report seeing these creepy faces pressed up against the windows in the historic buildings, water faucets turning on by themselves in the visitor center, and of course, lots of photographic evidence of mysterious orbs, if you believe in that sort of thing.
You know, what really strikes me here is the staff's reaction. It tells you something about how persistent these stories are.
Definitely. The endurance of these spectral accounts is such that the Fort Reno staff, they've completely embraced it. They now offer organized, lantern-guided ghost tours. Takes you all through the grounds, the historic buildings, even the big cemetery.
And they work with paranormal researchers?
They do. They actively partner with professional paranormal groups, letting the public engage directly with the remnants of its past, both as a POW camp and an old military post. It's actually become a key source of tourism for them.
Looking at a couple other big older sites, you see a similar theme, right? Activity tied really strongly to the land itself. Like the 101 Ranch near Ponca City, that place was once this huge, thriving cattle and like Wild West show empire. Then it basically collapsed.
And now, haunted by ghostly cowboys apparently, and Native Americans, visitors report spooky experiences out on those vast, kind of empty plains. The ghost of an empire.
And Fort Gibson, too. That one dates way back, early 19th century.
And just like Fort Washita, it's primarily haunted by military and Native American spirits. It really suggests that the deeper the roots of conflict go into the land, the broader the range of spectral activity you get. These places really show how Oklahoma's most violent or most transitional periods seem to leave the deepest, most pervasive spectral imprint.
Okay, so we've transitioned from that sort of raw frontier violence to the era of the oil boom. And that creates this really fascinating shift in the types of hauntings we see.
It really does.
In that first section, we were dealing with ghosts tied to territory, war, sudden physical violence. But now, we're moving into the Gilded Age, the early 20th century. And the tragedy here often feels rooted in something different. Hidden shame, maybe? Societal scandal, the emotional weight of huge, sudden wealth.
Exactly. This is the era of those gorgeous Art Deco skyscrapers and the Grand Victorian mansions, and they provide the perfect, almost claustrophobic settings for these kinds of tragedies. And we absolutely have to start with the most infamous one, the Skirvin Hotel in Oklahoma City.
Ah, yes, the Skirvin.
A 14-story icon, built in 1911 by W.B. Skirvin himself. It was meant to be the absolute peak of luxury, especially during Prohibition. Apparently it had this notorious underground speakeasy.
Right, but all that luxury was kind of built on, or at least overshadowed by, this terrible suppressed tragedy involving a young maid known only as Effie.
That's the core legend. Effie supposedly had an affair with the owner, W.B. Skirvin. When she became pregnant, Skirvin, absolutely desperate to avoid a massive public scandal, something that would ruin his reputation, his hotel's image, he allegedly locked her away. On the 10th floor.
Just locked her up.
Locked her up, isolated, alone. The story goes she gradually sank into despair, maybe postpartum depression, we don't know. She gave birth up there, and then shortly after, she committed suicide. Threw herself and the baby out the window.
Oh my God. That's horrific.
It is, and it feels like the perfect spectral residue of that Gilded Age hypocrisy, doesn't it? A tragedy born not from, like, battlefield violence, but from societal shame, reputation, and the massive power imbalance between a wealthy owner and a young employee.
And the ghost activity reported there seems to reflect that specific heartbreaking event, right?
Precisely. Guests consistently report hearing the sound of crying babies, specific noises like movement or sounds of despair coming from the 10th floor, lights flickering, doors slamming shut on their own, and maybe the most chilling. Staff and guests have reported seeing words like "hell LP me" appearing spontaneously in the steam on bathroom mirrors after a shower.
Wow. Okay, that's specific.
Very specific. And what really brings this haunting into the modern era, what kind of validates its public recognition beyond just local lore, are the stories about professional athletes.
Ah, the basketball players. I've heard about this.
Exactly. Professional basketball players, guys from really high-profile teams like the New York Knicks, the Chicago Bulls, have reported such disturbed, sleepless nights because of unexplained stuff happening in their rooms that they've actually requested, on multiple occasions, to stay somewhere else entirely.
Now, that's a powerful confirmation. When multi-million-dollar sports teams are changing their accommodation plans because of a ghost named Effie.
It makes it a tangible business concern, doesn't it? It's not just a story anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, shifting gears slightly, but staying with this theme, Guthrie, the old territorial capital. There's another building there layered with history, the Stone Lion Inn.
Right. Built in the early 1900s for the Houghton family. Apparently a pretty prominent family. They had 12 children.
12, wow.
Yeah. And later, the building served as a funeral parlor and a boarding house. So, I mean, the history of death is kind of baked into the walls even before you get to the famous ghost.
And the main ghost there is a child, right? Little Augusta. Or sometimes Irene.
I guess or sometimes Irene, yeah. An 8-year-old Houghton child who died very tragically back in the 1920s. And her death was just awful, completely preventable. It stemmed from a medical mistake.
What happened?
She was given an overdose of opium-laced cough syrup, apparently by a nurse who was attending to her while she was sick. It's such a specific, heartbreaking detail.
God, yeah. And probably not uncommon back then, using those kinds of ingredients.
Sadly, no. The use of opiates in pediatric remedies was disturbingly common, which just underscores the accidental nature of the tragedy. But her haunting, it's described as surprisingly intimate, sometimes mischievous even. She's not really portrayed as an angry spirit.
So what does she do?
Well, sometimes she apparently plays little games, moving small objects around the rooms. But guests have also reported being woken up by this deeply unsettling yet gentle sensation of a small child patting their face, or even feeling like they're being gently tucked into bed at night.
That's strangely comforting and incredibly creepy at the same time. Like she's still seeking comfort or maybe just wants to play.
That's the feeling people get. But there's more there too. We also hear reports of loud, disembodied footsteps on the back staircase, like someone heavy is walking up or down, and guests hearing the faint sound of music box melodies when there's definitely no physical music box anywhere in the house.
And Augusta isn't the only ghost there, is she?
No, she's not alone. The sources also confirm the presence of her father, F.E. Houghton, described as a middle-aged man often seen late in the evening smoking a long pipe.
Okay.
And his appearances are frequently accompanied by this vivid, unmistakable, and often very sudden smell of tobacco smoke just lingering in the air. It's like this chemical clue to his presence, which contrasts really sharply with the sort of innocent physical touch reported from his daughter.
Interesting juxtaposition, father and daughter, haunting in very different ways.
And our final opulent haunting for this section takes us back to Oklahoma City, the Overholser Mansion. This place is like the architectural embodiment of the city's founding era. Built by Henry Overholser and his wife, Anna Ione Overholser, she was known as the Queen of Society.
So a very prominent family.
Extremely. And it seems Anna's lingering presence is maybe the most, refined, historically accurate haunting in the state. It's like she's still playing the perfect hostess, even in death.
That's so.
Her ghost is consistently described as a petite woman, wearing a white gown with a very specific Gibson girl hairstyle, which is an exact match for her photographs from the period.
Hey, that's precise.
Very. She's seen gliding through the rooms or sometimes peering out of those dramatic turret windows. And her appearances are often followed by this powerful specific scent of fresh roses, which, the sources confirm, were her absolute favorite flowers in life.
The anecdotes connected to her sound less like residual energy and more like, well, like she's still aware, conscious.
Exactly. There's this story from a former museum director. She once had this incredibly vivid dream about a young girl wearing a very specific Victorian gown. Later, browsing through archives, she saw a photograph of the Overholser daughter wearing the exact same dress, a dress she swears she'd never seen or even known about before the dream.
Whoa.
And get this, 15 years later, the connection was apparently still there. A visitor to the mansion came up to the director and relayed a message they claimed to have received directly from the spirit. Anna wants her Bible put back on the table.
You're kidding.
Nope. The director, who didn't even know the Bible existed, searched around and eventually found it stored away in a closet. Put it back on the table. It really seems like Anna maintains her meticulous domain and requires her earthly possessions to be kept just so, still running the household. All right, so we've gone from frontier violence to the tragedies hidden behind wealth. Now, our deep dive has to include Oklahoma's cultural centers too, right? The places people gather for art, history, performance.
Absolutely. Museums, theaters, places where the spirits seem tied not just to the building, but maybe to the founders, the performers, or even the art itself.
Starting in Tulsa, then, the Gilcrease Museum. That's a huge one, isn't it? Massive collection of American, Western, and Native American art.
Huge. Thomas Gilcrease, the oil baron who founded it, started collecting way back in 1913, and his personal attachment to this collection was apparently so profound. The sources report his spirit simply refuses to leave. It's a very specific, almost territorial haunting.
So he's still watching over his collection. Seems like it. He's reportedly seen wandering the grounds of his original rock house on the property, strolling along the garden paths, and frequently seen lingering near his own mausoleum, which is also right there.
And what about general activity? Besides seeing the founder?
Oh, plenty of that. Staff and visitors consistently report the kind of general activity you might expect from a large old building holding that much stuff. Unexplained noises, doors slamming shut, sudden and really significant temperature drops, and lots of technical malfunction. Equipment just going haywire for no reason. Apparently, the high turnover rate among security guards there is often attributed, at least anecdotally, to this unsettling feeling that the deceased founder is constantly watching them, monitoring his collection.
Okay, that's creepy enough. But then there's the part about the children.
Yes. The truly fascinating and frankly kind of heartbreaking element of the Gilcrease haunting is this recurring rumor, or maybe more than a rumor, of 7 distinct child spirits.
7? Why 7?
That's the mystery. The sources don't point to one single specific tragedy, like, say, a fire or an accident, that would account for that many young souls being tied to the place.
So what do, these child ghosts?
Well, they all reportedly have very distinct, almost catalog behaviors. There's one that seems to play or hide near the plants in the conservatory area. Another one is always seen watching visitors near the main entrance. There's supposedly a mischievous one that moves small items around. Another is associated with the stairs, sometimes accompanied by faint laughter. And yet another is often seen just gazing out the windows, almost like they're waiting for someone who never arrives. There's a lot of specific activity for children.
Is there any theory, like where did they come from?
The implication seems to be that these are spirits collected over the property's long history. Maybe from before Gilcrease even acquired the land. Or perhaps spirits of children who were somehow connected to founder's family or life. But the sheer number and the distinct nature of their activities makes the Gilcrease haunting incredibly complex and intense.
And that intensity even led to a police incident, right?
It did, a pretty serious one. Apparently, after they installed new security cameras, the motion detectors in one specific room, the south bedroom, kept triggering late at night, over and over.
So they called the cops.
Yeah, eventually they called the police. And the police brought trained canine units. But according to the reports, the dogs just whimpered, cried, and absolutely refused to enter that room, just wouldn't go in.
Wow. Dogs usually know.
Right, so the officers had to go up alone. They confirmed the motion detection was triggering, but found no living source, nothing physically there. That extreme reluctance from trained police dogs, that's a pretty powerful piece of data suggesting something unseen was definitely present.
Okay, shifting from art to music. Cain's Ballroom. Also in Tulsa. Legendary place.
Absolutely legendary. Built in 1924, famously hosted Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys for their first regular radio broadcast. Just steeped in music history.
And apparently Bob Wills loved the place so much, his ghost is rumored to still be hanging around.
That's the story. Along with a mysterious lady in red, nobody seems quite sure who she is, and another figure named Chloe.
What kind of activity do they report at Cain's?
Pretty classic theatrical haunting stuff mostly. Lights flickering unexpectedly, sudden cold spots in the room, people capturing orbs and photos if you put stock in that, disembodied voices heard after hours, sometimes giggling or even faint singing.
But the sources give more detail on Chloe. Right?
They do. She's described as a dancer, probably from the 1920s or 30s, and her presence is often first sensed by smell, this lingering kind of old-fashioned floral perfume scent, a very specific olfactory clue.
Interesting. And where is she seen?
She's frequently seen just sitting quietly at the edges of the ballroom or sometimes near the stage, apparently just silently swaying as if listening to music only she can hear. Seems pretty harmless, mostly melancholic, just sort of stuck in the memory of the music and the dance floor.
And then there's the cowboy.
Ah, yes, the cowboy. This is a great one. A figure described as a man dressed in early 1900s cowboy gear, wide-brimmed hat, dusty boots, the whole look. He was apparently sighted once, very clearly, near the concession stand, trying to order a 10-cent bag of popcorn.
10 cents!
Right, before just vanishing into thin air. That moment feels like a perfect snapshot of a ghost, completely unstuck in time, unable to process that a century has passed, and popcorn costs more than a dime.
Yeah, it really does. It makes you wonder, are they attached to the place? The trauma? Or maybe just the memory of their last happy moment, like cheap popcorn and dancing at Cain's?
It's a good question. Now let's quickly touch on a few other historic theaters. The Constantine Theater in Powyscua. That place started life as a hotel back in the 1880s before being converted into a theater around 1914.
So layered history again.
Definitely. And it's reportedly haunted by Sappho Constantine Brown. She was the daughter of the guy who founded it, and also this recurring figure known only as the woman in the button-front dress, who's frequently seen up in the balcony area.
And because it was a hotel first.
Exactly. Because of its prior life, especially as what sounds like a pretty active, maybe rowdy hotel, the building apparently suffers from some intense residual energy, like spontaneous audio playbacks.
What do you mean?
Sometimes, completely without warning, the loud, angry sounds of a past fight just erupt. You hear angry voices yelling, loud thuds, even what sounds like furniture crashing, like a violent scene from its hotel days just replaying itself, suddenly and violently, in the empty halls.
Yikes. Okay, the Tulsa Theater. That one has a particularly dark layer, doesn't it?
It does. A beautiful building built in 1914, but it was used temporarily as a detention center during the horrific 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre.
Right.
That temporary use just injected this massive amount of historical trauma right into the structure itself. You can't ignore that layer.
But the main haunting people talk about is different.
Yeah, interestingly, the most commonly cited haunting is actually that of the famous Italian tenor Enrico Caruso.
Caruso. What's his connection?
He performed there in 1920, but fell seriously ill right afterward. That illness eventually led to his death from pleurisy in 1921. So his spirit is believed to linger there, maybe connected to that specific final performance, the peak of his career perhaps, or maybe the place where his fatal decline began, tied to the building where it started.
Wow. And one more quick one, the Washita Theater in Chickasha.
That one's reportedly haunted by the spirit of a former projectionist. People report disembodied laughing, lights flickering in the projection booth, activity associated with a man who supposedly died while working there. Again, the spirit seems tied to the execution of their craft, their job in that space.
Okay, we've covered structured violence on the frontier, the hidden tragedies of wealth and society, the echoes in cultural spaces. Now let's shift to locations where the haunting seems to stem directly from one specific, often profoundly violent or medically tragic historical event. Places that are almost named for the darkness that happened there.
And we absolutely have to start with one of the most famous and genuinely disturbing locations in the state for this, Dead Woman's Crossing, near Weatherford, out in Custer County.
Just the name itself.
Right, it's a chilling memorial right off the bat, named for the tragic and still officially unsolved murder of a woman named Katie DeWitt James and her infant daughter, Lulu Bell, way back in the early 1900s.
What's the story behind it?
Well, Katie had apparently boarded a train trying to flee an abusive husband. During the journey, she befriended another woman, Fannie Norton, who is known to be a prostitute. The mystery really deepens when, in August 1905, Katie's skeleton was found, fully clothed. Underneath a wooden wagon crossing near Deer Creek, the baby, Lulu Bell, was with her.
Just found there, under the bridge.
Yes, a skeletal mother and child. An incredibly disturbing discovery.
And the suspicion fell on Fannie Norton.
Immediately. Fannie Norton was the last person known to have seen Katie and the baby alive. And later, she apparently returned from somewhere in a buggy that was covered in blood, but without Katie and Lulu Bell. When a private detective hired by Katie's family finally tracked Fannie down and started questioning her, Fannie immediately poisoned herself. Died right there.
Whoa. That's highly suggestive of guilt.
Extremely.
Yeah.
That act of sudden, fatal self-harm strongly suggests deep guilt or involvement. But because she died, the exact crime, the how and why, was never officially solved. It left the case perpetually open, unresolved.
And the haunting reflects that lack of resolution.
Entirely. The spectral activity is completely linked to Katie's unresolved trauma, and this idea of her eternal search for justice, or maybe just peace for her child. Her restless spirit is said to roam the area near Deer Creek, constantly searching, sometimes heard calling out for her baby daughter.
And the wagon wheels.
Yes. Witnesses also claim to hear the distinct rhythmic rattle of old wooden wagon wheels right above them when they're standing under that historic bridge, like an eerie sonic echo of the very moment her body was likely dumped there at the site of her demise. Just awful.
Okay, shifting from unsolved murder to medical trauma. The Cherokee Strip Museum in Alva.
Right. The building itself wasn't always a museum. It was actually built as a hospital back in 1932.
Oh.
And the fact that it's now a museum, but still contains some of these genuinely unsettling historical medical artifacts that seems to amplify the atmosphere, those old tools and equipment are still there in the rooms.
And the haunting is tied to its hospital past.
Directly. It stems from the building's history of patient death. Specifically, the spirits of patients who reportedly died there from botched surgeries or maybe just lingering illness. What's kind of unique here, though, is that the sources suggest these spirits are somehow inexplicably confined mostly to the first floor, even though the upper floors, which are apparently sealed off now, are described in some accounts as areas of intense, cold, and strange auditory phenomena, like the activity is concentrated downstairs.
What specific things happen on that first floor?
Well, reports include phantom piano music, like the piano playing itself when no one's near it, very localized, intense cold spots, disembodied voices, naturally, and maybe the most visually unsettling, a mysterious dark spot on the floor, said to be a bloodstain that absolutely refuses to wash away or be covered up.
Seriously, they can't clean it.
Apparently not. Despite constant cleaning attempts, remediation efforts, it just reappears, like this stubborn physical reminder of the building's tragic operational past as a hospital.
And this museum also connects back to the military history we talked about earlier.
It does, in a way. It's also reportedly haunted by a friendly German ghost, nicknamed Trapper. His spirit seems to be tied to an item in a POW exhibit there, probably an old uniform piece or maybe a tool that was moved to the museum from a nearby military site, likely Fort Reno.
So he followed his possession.
Seems so. Trapper is believed to just kind of watch over his specific possession, anchoring his spirit to this former hospital, now museum.
Beyond these specific named places, the sources list a lot of cemeteries and abandoned sites too, right? Where history just sits heavy.
Oh, absolutely. Mound Cemetery, for instance. That site dates back to the Trail of Tears era. It's rumored to be deeply haunted by Native American spirits. People report seeing mysterious spheres of light, feeling profound cold spots, and just experiencing an atmosphere that they describe as inherently eerie and deeply sad.
And then there's Petcher Ghost Town. That's a whole different kind of haunting.
It really is. Pitcher was once this booming lead and zinc mining town, but now it's completely abandoned, deserted due to extreme environmental contamination from the mining.
So the haunting isn't from one event, but from the death of a whole town.
Exactly. It's tied to the slow death of a community, the decay of industry. Visitors who brave the deserted streets report seeing odd flickering lights in the abandoned buildings, and even spooky apparitions wandering around. It's like the ghosts of a defunct industry and a forgotten, displaced population. Very bleak.
And one more really tragic one. The Sacred Heart Mission and Cemetery in Kanawha.
Yes, that one's heartbreaking. Dates back to 1877, originally a convent and a school run by Benedictine monks. But a terrible fire swept through in 1901. It destroyed the main building and tragically killed many children who were trapped inside.
Oh, no.
It's a trauma site rooted in just pure, awful tragedy. Ghost hunters and investigators who go there consistently report hearing the sounds, frantic cries, screams, but also sometimes the faint, eerie laughter of children. And there are even reports of actual sightings of small apparitions, believed to be the children who died in that fire.
All right, so for our second to last section, let's zoom in. Let's focus on the undisputed geographical hotspots for paranormal activity in Oklahoma. Places where the sheer density of stories, the concentration of these accounts, almost creates a culture of haunting. We're talking Guthrie and Oklahoma City.
Yeah, Guthrie first, the former territorial capital. It's arguably the most haunted city per square mile in the entire state. It has such a high paranormal density that there's a very well-established, popular Guthrie Ghost Walk. It's like a mile-long guided tour that focuses specifically on the spooky side of its Victorian architecture. The old saloons, some of which still have bullet holes in the ceiling from frontier days, and of course the infamous territorial jail.
And one of the major sites there, one that sounds deeply disturbing, is the old Masonic Boys' Home, which is now the Dominion House Hotel.
That's right. This former orphanage, dating back to the early 1900s, is just plagued by these terrifying rumors. The main one involves an allegedly evil headmistress who supposedly murdered some of the boys under her care down in the basement.
That's horrifying. Does the reported activity line up with those rumors?
Chillingly, yes. The paranormal activity reported there aligns almost perfectly with these horrific stories. People hear the sounds of children crying, sometimes screaming. The ghost of a specific, scare-looking little girl is seen frequently. And there's also the spirit of a former staff member, a man who apparently committed suicide in the building, who is said to haunt the bell tower specifically.
You know, you hear those evil headmistress or cruel matron stories connected to old orphanages or asylums quite often.
It's true. Those rumors often seem to reflect this pervasive societal fear, especially from the early 20th century, about unchecked authority, institutional abuse, things that definitely happened. But then, in contrast, you have a place like the Bluebell Saloon in Guthrie, also haunted. But the story there is rooted in very personal, violent trauma, not institutional fear.
What happened at the Bluebell?
Well, it was once a pretty bustling bordello run by a woman known as Miss Lizzie and her girls. Tragedy struck when one of the women, named Claudia, was brutally beaten to death. And the legend says she was actually buried right there inside the saloon itself.
Buried in the saloon?
That's the story. And later, Miss Lizzie herself and another woman named Estelle were also found dead under mysterious circumstances. Foul play was suspected, maybe connected to their line of work or disgruntled patrons. The sources seem to confirm that the spirits of all three women, Claudia, Miss Lizzie, and Estelle, haunt the location now, likely tied forever to their violent ends within those walls.
Okay, let's shift to Oklahoma City, the modern capital. It seems to have its share of urban legends, often linked to its own rapid growth, especially out in Stockyard City.
Definitely. Langston's Western Wear is a good example. That building, now a store, was formerly a dance hall, a place where they had taxi dancers.
Taxi dancers?
Yeah, women who were paid usually by the dance to dance with male patrons. Kind of a common thing in the early to mid-20th century.
Okay, and it's haunted by?
Two sisters, apparently, who worked there as taxi dancers. Patty and Rose. The story goes that Patty was shot and killed by a jealous lover, right there on the dance floor in what is now, ironically, the children's clothing section of the store.
Yeah.
Her sister, Rose, was so grief-stricken that she went upstairs shortly after and committed suicide by hanging herself.
Oh, that's just tragic. Both sisters lost in the same place.
Incredibly tragic.
Mm-hmm.
And that connection, that double trauma, seems to create an extremely intense, haunting environment. The second floor, where Rose died, is described by staff and investigators as extremely haunted, sometimes even feeling malicious.
Malicious how?
Well, one former staff member provided this chilling anecdote, claiming that she felt a hostile spirit aggressively push her down the stairs, physically shoved her. So the intensity of those violent emotional traumas seems to clearly translate into some pretty aggressive paranormal activity.
Yikes. Okay, and one last really dark site in OKC we should mention, St. Vincent's Hospital.
Ah, yes. St. Vincent's. Started in 1945, closed down in the 1980s. This site is associated with just profound historical darkness. There are reports, some documented, some rumored, of severe patient abuses, torture, even killings carried out by doctors and nurses over the years.
Like specific incidents.
One documented case involves a nurse who apparently suffocated two patients back in 1960. But the overall reputation of the place before it closed was one of neglect and cruelty.
Ew.
So, now abandoned, it's widely believed to be home to just a multitude of tortured souls. It's become the ultimate abandoned asylum nightmare, really. A deep, deep well of residual pain and suffering. Not a place you'd want to explore alone.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, let's just briefly acknowledge the more organized ways people engage with all this haunted history, the tours and such, and maybe a couple of really unique standalone sites that don't quite fit neatly into our other categories.
Right. Organized tours are a huge part of the Oklahoma paranormal scene, you could say. Especially in Tulsa. You've got Tulsa Spirit Tours, for example. They offer, well, everything. Party bus tours, haunted pub crawls. And their flagship tour covers some heavy hitters. Sites related to the Tulsa Race Massacre, the Gilcrease home and tomb, even the quirky Tulsa Cave House. And they apparently incorporate real-time electronic voice phenomena, EVPs, into the experience for guests.
Trying to capture evidence on the sly. Interesting. And then there are the cemetery tours, which sound a bit more somber.
Yeah, they offer a different vibe. Enid Cemetery has something called Tombstone Tales. You ride in a horse-drawn carriage, and there are costumed reenactors portraying the people buried there. And Edmond has historic ghost tours at Graceland Cemetery, where guides actually portray the city's founding fathers telling their stories among the gravestones. It really transforms the spectral into a kind of performance art, a way to engage with history.
Okay, now for those really unique spots, the ones that are spooky because of the environment itself, almost like the parallel forest.
Ah, yes, the Parallel Forest, down in the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge. This place is fascinating. It's literally 20,000 cedar trees, planted back in 1912 by the government, supposedly as an experiment in pole farming.
And they're planted. Strange.
Very strangely. They're planted precisely 6 feet apart from each other, in perfect rows, north-south and east-west. It creates this incredibly unnatural, rigid symmetry that covers about 16 acres.
Yeah.
It just looks wrong.
And that affects people.
Deeply. Visitors consistently report these extreme feelings of unease just being in there, this sense that something is fundamentally off about the perfect, unnatural symmetry. And on top of that feeling, they also report hearing disembodied voices whispering among the trees, and sometimes the distinct rhythmic sound of unseen Native American drummers.
Drummers? Why drummers?
Well, given that the entire Wichita Mountains area was ancestral Native American land, long before the government planted those trees, it seems like the unnaturalness of the planting, combined with the deep spiritual history of the land itself, somehow amplifies this unsettling atmosphere. The drumming feels like an echo of the land's original spirit, protesting the weird grid.
That makes a creepy kind of sense. Okay, one last quick one. Bird Creek School, near Pawhuska.
Right, just a little one-room schoolhouse. Apparently, it was once used for Native American children. The legend here is much lighter, almost playful, compared to everything else we've discussed.
What's the story?
They say if you go inside and write your name on the old chalkboard, the ghost of a mischievous former student, a little boy named Sammy, will eventually erase it.
Huh. That's kind of charming, actually.
It is. A little piece of lighthearted interaction, a playful spirit tied to a specific, simple location. A nice contrast to some of the heavier hauntings. You know, looking back at everything we've covered, this raises an important question, doesn't it? If we try to connect the dots across the whole state, you see these really clear patterns emerging. Almost all of these truly compelling, specific stories. Think about Aunt Jane's violent end at Fort Washita, Katie James's unsolved murder at the Crossing, the awful institutional abuse at St. Vincent's, those poor children lost in the Sacred Heart fire. They almost all stem directly from some kind of unresolved violence, deep tragedy, or profound betrayal. These aren't just random spooky tales. They feel like the spectral residue, the echoes of the rapid and sometimes incredibly brutal development of Oklahoma's frontier and its cities.
That's a great way to put it. So for everyone listening, you now have, hopefully, a pretty comprehensive map of the spectral side of Oklahoma, complete with specific names, locations, and the often tragic histories behind the hauntings. Whether you decide to seek out a formal ghost walk next time you're there, or maybe just tour a historic mansion like the Overholser, the context we've shared today, hopefully it transforms what might seem like a simple scare into something deeper. A complex encounter with the state's often painful but very real history.
Indeed. I think the difference between just a spooky rumor and a truly resonant historical haunting often lies in the depth of that underlying tragedy.
So here's something to mull over, a final provocative thought for you. Oklahoma's history, as we've seen, is defined by these massive, often jarring shifts: the land run, the sudden wealth of the oil boom, brutal military conflicts, the displacement of entire cultures. Which of these huge historical upheavals do you think anchors more spirits to the land? Is it the sudden, explosive, violent death like Aunt Jane's beheading or Patty being shot at Langston's? Or is it the slow, lingering decay of a forgotten purpose like Pitcher Ghost Town slowly crumbling, or the decades of quiet cruelty at a place like St. Vincent's? Which kind of trauma leaves the deeper, more lasting spectral mark?